ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
We've been making conversations for 20 years now, and in that time we've heard stories from thousands of people. But there are a handful of guests who make return visits, friends of the show if you like, and there's one man in particular who never fails to strike a chord. I'm talking, of course, about actor and writer William McInnes. Whenever William joins us, the response is huge. And I think that's because his stories are not only very funny, he also shows up with his whole heart, and he expresses it all in outstanding Australian vernacular with a level of freewheeling exuberance that sometimes threatens to tip the whole thing over. William's stories range across fatherhood and family, love, grief, and rabbits. And they've stayed with so many of you. So today, to help kick off a month celebrating 20 years of conversations, we're bringing you something special. Maximum McInnes, a collection of some of the best moments from William's time with us. And we begin with the mayhem of the McInnes household.
I remember my father, he'd yell a lot and he was always running around doing things or pretending to do things. I mean, it was fantastic on a weekend, like a Sunday afternoon when the theme for World at War was ending or some Elvis Presley movie was ending, and he'd just be wandering around trying to find things to do because he was just like doing things all the time. So he'd yell at you if he couldn't think of, "What are you doing? You're right." Well, yeah, I'm just sitting here. Gotta get on, gotta fix this. So he'd do that, and then about 5 minutes later he'd come up and he'd give you a big bear hug and just say, "I love you, you're all right," and then walk off and yell at someone else.
So it's the shouting mixed with love and affection. That's fatherhood, I suppose,
when I was a kid, but all grown-ups, all the people who inhabited the grown-up world used to yell. Like even the people, you were down in the shopkeepers, "Are you right there? What do you want, champ?" "There's some coppers and a snake." "Okay, which one? How many?" You know, just yelling constantly. And I have taken that through my own life.
Yeah, and the other thing they'd yell about is telling everyone else to keep it down.
Yeah, be quiet.
Yeah. Shut up!
Can you keep it down?
Yeah.
Or my father had this fantastic thing where he'd sort of mime turning a dial down on a radiogram, like that. And then he'd get more agitated, like he was having some sort of fit. And then he'd just, "For Christ's sake, shut up!"
My dad was always saying in the kitchen, "Get out from under my feet. You're under my bloody feet."
Dad threats were fantastic.
Yeah.
Dad threats were the best. "You going to make me get out of my chair?" I took a girl out, and her father was the sort of radio guy. He gave me one of the worst dad threats. It was very hard to take seriously. He said, "She'll be back home at a reasonable hour, or it's Krakatoa, Northern Java for you, son." And I was thinking, who says that?
Krakatoa, north of Java?
Or whatever
it should be east of Java.
East of Java, or west of Java, because it was a film. But Krakatoa, west of Java for you. What are you going to do?
So you would have heeded that warning. You were.
No, I went out at a great time.
You went out at a great time anyway, yeah. Right. When you kids were making up in the back of the car, would your dad try and whack you while he was still driving the car?
He'd just yell. It was my mother you had to worry about it because she had a better backhand than Rod Laver. She would really sort of deal out some punitive measures to enforce discipline. I mean, one of my sisters said to my dad, says, "Why do we yell so much in this family?" And my father said, "Ask your mother." And Mum said, "I'm Welsh, he's Irish, so if you don't like yelling, singing and fighting, you can go somewhere else." And then she went, "Go try your luck at the Presbyterians by the bus stop. See how long you last." There were many great rugby league callers in Brisbane. I think George Doniger and Mick Vevers. George I loved because he was accurate and passionate and he just loved it. Fonda was operatic. Fonda was... there's so many great stories about Fonda. Like he got hiccups the night Redcliffe played Brothers. And
what, during the game?
Yeah. And it's going to... Excuse me. He's this great, big, colourful, legendary... Like he used to play for Norths and he apparently used to have a comb in his sock, you know, to sort of do his hair. And that great story everyone knows about, you know, the ambulance took him off of Lang Park and it was just driving out of the ground and then he sort of burst open and leapt out of the doors and kept on playing. He was a classic Fonda. But George Doniger's favourite thing was the with Mick and the George Simon Suit Factory. As Mick Vevers hears Warwick's kick, he's put it over. And George goes, "Oh, yes, you beauty!" And there's Bruce in a caramel suit The George Simon's Seed Factory. Looks like he just stepped out of a vat of caramel milkshake mix.
There is something that has been lost in those local football competitions, whether it's rugby league or Australian rules football, the idea that this is your team and you hate the person in the next suburb because they support the other team.
It was suburb against suburb, and the guy who was the champion was the bloke who sort of, caught the bus to work every morning, or, the girl who won the Commonwealth Games gold medal works at the newsagents.
Now, both you and I were blessed with fathers who enjoyed the kind of inventiveness of Australian English. It meant that I was given all kinds of names. Dad once said to me that I was full of piss and wind like a barber's cat. He also, if I was slow, he'd say I was slow as a wet week, or I was as slow as an old mole at a christening. That was another choice phrase. What kind of nicknames did your dad have for you?
Oh, he had so many. Yeah. He just would rattle them off. My name is Darryl William. So he wanted to call me William, and my mother wanted to call me Darryl. But she would say, it's not like the Australian mate's Welsh. Like, that helped. D-A-R-R-E-L-L.
Like Darryl Lee?
Yeah, Darryl Lee, exactly. So I got hyphenated Darryl William. And my father used to call me Drillbit. Darryl, Drillbit, come here, William. Arse-part was one. Arse-part was what we got called. My brother said, why do you call us arse-parts? And my father said, well, you're not good enough to be the whole arse. Just that bit down the middle. And he used to sort of be backhanded stuff like that. And my mother, if you didn't call me stupid boy, which was from Dad's Army, my little pike, she called me, you stupid boy. She called me my brother Kaka 1. And I was Kaka 2, and I said, what's that mean? He says, you're like crayfish, arms and legs and head full of crap. Was that sort of offhand? And it was not said like it was sort of in a weird sort of knockabout way. It was like, I love you, and that's just the way we talk to each other.
There was an affection in it. It's hard to sort of say, to make that make sense nowadays, but there's kind of an affection behind that kind of disparaging nickname.
Well, that's like when she was dying. A great story. I'm sure I've told you before, but one of us was with her all the time, as much as we could be, and there was a sister with her, Sister Joseph with her. And I walked in, and the sister goes, my mum's not very well, and she's just lying with her eyes closed, and she says, oh, Iris, your son's here to see you. And my mother says, which one is it? And the sister went, I'm not quite sure. And my mother goes, is it the fat one or the stupid one? And the sister goes, I'm not quite sure, Iris. And she sort of turned to me and opened one eye, and she said, it's bound to happen. The stupid one's gotten fat. And I just fell about laughing.
This is on a deathbed?
Well, she was on the way out, yeah. I mean, she put on a show. And it was like, it was saying, hey, this is not such a big deal. This is an insight into the Queensland mentality, I think, of the time. Morning recess was called Little Lunch, and recess was called Big Lunch. Little Lunch and Big Lunch. And I remember when, Nixon went to China, and that was live on television, when Miss Law was our teacher.
Was that at Humpy Bong Primary School?
That was Humpy Bong Primary, and Miss Law said to us, and it was like there's this largish Chinese gentleman in a sort of shapeless sort of military thing that made him look slightly like a sort of, a dairy steward from the Brisbane Royal Show. And then there was Richard Nixon, who was sort of had an overcoat on and brilliantine wavy hair and jowls and these dark eyes, and he looked like the sort of bloke who'd be selling white goods in between, World Championship wrestling and sports scene. Miss Law said, children, these two men could blow up the world by Big Lunch. Let's pray that they don't. And we prayed that they wouldn't blow up the world by Big Lunch. No pressure 3D. But we got through Big Lunch and beyond, which was pretty wild. Well, my mum and my auntie loved talking poetry. It was like recordings, usually Leonard Teal, bush poetry.
There was movement at the station.
The word had passed around that the cult from Albury Grotto got away, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And then Richard Burton, doing Under Milkwood, to begin at the beginning, it is slow back. She loved it on, she put it on, and she said, will you be quiet? I'm trying to listen to him speak. She loved poems in Australian dialect, and she loved, the favourite one she loved was Hanrahan, which is a great poem.
We'll all be ruined,
said Hanrahan,
before the year is out.
Perfect thing about, experts. It's a bunch of guys finished mass and they're sitting on their haunches and they're talking about the events of the day, and they're all experts.
Professional pessimists.
Yes, and that's what most panels are of experts. An economic crisis, a military crisis, a health crisis. Hanrahan's spirit looms large because no matter what, the news will all be ruined, said Hanrahan, before the year is out. Like, there's a drought, and then the rains come, but oh no, there are floods, will all be ruined. Mum used to love putting on the voice, we'll all be ruined, said Hanrahan. And Miss Law taught us that poem, and she said this poem is written in the Australian dialect. And that's why they're saying ruined for ruin. And a kid called Russell Patterson, who earned immortality because he would eat Perkins paste occasionally as showing off, he got up and he had to read it in an Australian dialect. He got up and he went, well, I'll be ruined, said Hanrahan, before the year is out. And he got hit over the back of the head. Mrs. Law goes, you stupid boy, what are you doing? And he said, I'm speaking in Australian Dalek.
Dialect.
Dalek.
Your mum was always big on being optimistic. She wasn't going to have it with these Hanrahans, was she? She was always about you being a glass half full
glass
family.
Glass half full, yeah. It's a great way to be, a glass half full. I love Brisbane because it's the city of bridges. You know, there's so many bridges that dot the Brisbane River. And the one, which is an old deco thing, is called the William Jolly Bridge. And it's a beautiful looking bridge, but my mother said, you get yourself no sulks, no sooks in this family, no Hanrahans. You get yourself across the William Jolly Bridge to Happy Land.
Oh, that's
lovely. It's
lovely.
so beautiful.
This is Conversations with Richard Feidler.
Coming up next, William discusses the surprising generosity and gentleness of knockabout free-range fathers.
One of his friends, after he died, said he was like Chinese New Year. It was always a party, you know. It was as loud as a battalion of elephants and just as happy. It was fantastic seeing him do things because he was a small businessman, an entrepreneur, son, like you'd know. And he had his high business, don't break your back, ring for Mac.
That was your dad's business slogan?
Yeah, don't break your back, ring for Mac.
Did that go on at the local cinema or at the on local radio?
Once he bought a Val Morgan ad and we all had to go and see it. It's got an arm and a leg, but it's worth it. And there's about 6 people, us basically. Well, it was a Richard Harris movie and Omar Sharif was an oil tanker captain. Juggernaut. And that was it. And I can't remember the double bill, but it came up and he yelled.
Right, was it? Right, okay, so your dad had a Val Morgan ad. What was the slogan again?
Don't break your back, ring for Mac.
Don't for Mac, right. Followed by another slide that said, after the movie, why not pop by to the chat and chew?
That's right.
That kind of thing?
But they had the voice that was like something like, we'll meet you at the Ox for that business dinner or that special night out. That was the best. Oh, hello, special night out.
Redcliffe's most sumptuous array of seafood.
See you at the Ox.
Dine a la carte.
There was one, I remember, this was an ad from Brisbane. This is way off topic. But I remember an ad for Neptunes of the Valley. And it was, our special cocktails with pre-peeled prawns.
In Melbourne, my favourite local ad was for Del Monte Suits.
Oh, yeah.
How about in Brisbane? Did you have similar local ads?
Errol Stewart's Warehouses. You pay less when we look after you, the bunch of softies. And then my mother, when I was very little, this is when we would be going to bed and she'd come and give you a cuddle and a kiss and say, this is where the little elves cuddle down to hide themselves. Into fluffy beds they creep, close their eyes and go to sleep. Nighty-night, sweetly rest like the birdie in its nest. And then if your father came in, he'd go, you pay less when we look after you. Hey! That was it. It was like fathers back then were free roam. They had more important things to do than just be a father. I mean, I remember my dad having a kid out the back after coming back from the beach, and there's a customer, and he gets up, I'll go see him, and my mum goes, Colin, you can't go out there. You haven't got a shirt on. And he said, well, it's a Redcliffe tuxedo, and he turned around, he said, is me bow straight? He just walked out there in his togs.
The 70s were an age when a middle-aged, overweight man could feel quite comfortable just wearing a pair of togs around the place.
Yes, nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
The Redcliffe tuxedo. My father was this great big sort of volcanic character, but Mum always used to have to chop the wood for the fire. We had a fire stove.
If I was ever being lazy, my father would sing to me, he holds the lantern while his mother chops the wood. So that was your mum. She chopped the wood.
Well, she sent Dad out to chop the wood, and he took his time. And he's this immense bloke in a blue singlet. And I remember him sort of chopping wood really slowly. My mum said, make like a wood chopper at the Ekka. He said, yes, love, of course. And he's just tooling round, and he says, well, this is not my kind of fun, son. I'm sort of looking at him, And then it was like evening, just, the sunset and dusk, which is a beautiful time in southeast Queensland. And I remember he stopped and he sort of held out this finger and there was a Christmas beetle on it, this golden scarab. And he sort of looked at me and he said, there you go, Christmas. Christmas is coming. And he smiled and he just lifted it up and it flew off. And I thought, my God, what a beautiful thing. And, he was a big, strong guy and he was a bit loud and he was a war veteran and a return man and all that. But he was surprisingly gentle on lots of occasions, and he hated seeing people go without. He couldn't work out why the Second World War had been fought when he saw people in straitened circumstances. He was a very generous guy in that really old, unreconstructed way. It was almost, if you showed too much emotion, you were a little bit not on form. He used to sort of say, I've got a bit of the sobs going on. Just leave me a bit, will you? I went to a fancy dress party as Auntie Jack. My mother made this outfit for me, the old Graham Bond character from the early 70s. And I was just walking around with a boxing glove and a twin set and my football boots. And my father was driving back from delivering some acros and he nearly drove into somebody's fence when he saw it was me. And he goes, you can't be doing that. You can't be playing dress-ups in bloody public, son. So he took me to a night at the Redcliffe Police Youth Citizens Club, which was called a father and son glove night, a night of boxers. And it was Redcliffe's finest pitching themselves against Kilcoy, I think it was. And all the Redcliffe people won, except this one kid. And he was really ashamed, this boy. And his father wasn't mean to him because all the kids got a chocolate bar, a free chocolate bar. And this kid had a fat lip and he was a bit of a tough, but he wasn't a bad boy. And his dad gave him $2 to sort of, get some Coke or something with his Chiquito or whatever it was. And he said, I don't deserve it. He said, I'll see yourself. And he went back to watching the boxing. This kid was just distraught. I think my father took me because he thought, I just want to see. I don't want him running around, in drag. Not in Redcliffe. Not when I'm doing my business. I'll take him to the father and son glove night. And when we were leaving, I was out the back and this boy was just sitting there by himself and my old man just walked up to him and he just sort of said a few words.
What did he say?
He said, you'll be right, you'll get him next time. You did very well. You did very well. I'm very proud of you. And he gave him a chocolate bar. He said, you deserve that. He got him, bought one. And the kid really, I don't know, just sort of stood a bit taller. And it was just an old school sort of generosity.
A small act of kindness.
And then I thought, that's pretty cool. And then we were walking back and the old man said, you like playing dress-ups, do you? And I said, sometimes it's fun. He said, it's not my cup of tea, but, if it floats your boat, that's all right. And he just sort of gave me a pat in the head. He didn't really quite get me because I was the youngest by a fair whack. I mean, because he was a carpenter too. And, he built houses as well as his hire business. And he was sort of an obvious man's man. And I'd bring home some of my manual training woodwork or metalwork, and he'd look at me and said, for Christ's sake, son, go to uni, you're not doing a trade. And it was frightening. I mean, because, being adept at manual training was sort of, a shortcut to manhood. If you had one of the manual arts teachers who were all incredibly hairy and sort of,
All mine had beards, all of them.
Yeah, they'll talk like that. They have voices down the back of their throat like a headmaster. This utensil, and they'd hold up some sort of indecipherable piece of twisted metal. This utensil's a handy utensil. Well done, Woods. Well done, your utensil's a handy utensil. That was the highest prize. I never got that. I used to steal other kids' work and try and pass it off as my own.
In my report cards for woodwork, every term it was the same. Woodwork, C+, and then the comment was a quiet, steady worker, which meant the teacher had forgotten who I was. We
had a guy called Dong after the Paul Hogan character. And he called me out, and I thought, have I got a handy utensil? And he says, this is a scone cutter disgrace.
A scone cutter disgrace? Was that like a pizza cutter or something like that?
It was a bit of stainless steel, thin stainless steel, twisted round, and you had to rivet it together, and with a little handle that was pointless, Not even a sort of baby could get their hand through it, and that was it.
My teachers, when they would express their displeasure with you, they'd say things like, I've had a gutful of you, Fiedler. They'd say things like that. What kind of insults were thrown your way by your teachers?
There was one great year 11 comment, "This boy isn't as clever as he thinks he is."
The impressive thing I've gotten from your book is how nicknames for people could often operate at about 6 or 7 steps of removal from the initial idea for it.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about how a client of your dad's hire business, who used to come in of Dutch origin, earned the nickname the Pharaoh.
Mr. Case Ankers was a house painter that my mother said, here he is, like a sort of a clipper rounding the Cape, because he had these he was a large man, he had this sort of billowing white painter's overalls and a paint-spattered sort of cane hat. And he talked like that, Case, yes. He was an old fellow like that. Do you talk all the things? He didn't like our dogs, and our dogs were Kelpies or cattle dogs. He'd just go off like Chinese New Year, They'd bark at anything. It was fantastic. And he had like little pugs that he could cuddle, And he said, "They're called now. I like dogs, but they're too barky. So can you please tell me," I'm doing an accent, which is probably wrong, but I'll do it anyway. He said, "I'll toot on the horn, and you will notch me." "Yes, Case. And then I will know that you can lock the dogs up." Right. "Yes, okay, Case, yes."
He'd toot the horn.
And he had this
so your dad would know to lock the dogs up.
It's Case. Right. And it was Mr. Ankers, and he'd come to get some trestles and have a cup of tea and have a chat. Because, one of the things that my father loved doing was chatting about anything, I remember walking past them, and my Mr. Ankers was just totally perplexed. And he said, "What does de Gaulle have anything to do with the Redcliffe Drive-In?" And my father's like, "That's it, Case. De Gaulle doesn't understand Australians." And I thought, what is he talking about? Charles de Gaulle. Yeah, going off in his sort of Citroen to go see Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. No, none. Anyway, so that was all right. It worked for a while. And then after a couple of weeks, my father got irritated with it. And he'd hear the toot, tooty, toot, toot. He'd go, "For Christ's sake, it's the bloody Pharaoh. Grab the dog!" The Pharaoh. "Grab the bloody dog, will ya?" And you think, what do I have to grab the dog for? "You idiot, grab the dog!" "Bloody idiot, bloody Pharaoh." And he mucked that. So you go on and this and the bloody Pharaoh, grab the dog. What do you call him? It's the bloody dog, it's the Pharaoh. So it was almost like he was was in the middle of a war and he's yelling at you, "Do it, can't you do it? We've got to grab the dog, it's the Pharaoh." And I used to love he'd go from having a chat to sort of, it was just volcanic. It was so much fun. And I said to him, "Why do you call Mr. Ankers the Pharaoh?" He said, "You're an idiot." You're an idiot. And I'm saying, I don't understand. He's the Pharaoh, son. Do you know nothing? Why do we send you to that bloody school? It's a waste of money. You know anything about history? No. You know. And he told me once, he finally said, "Sit down and I'll tell you." And he spoke to me like I was an idiot, which was, fair enough. Most people did. And he said, he comes to this place, our home, where I run my business. He sits in his car and he toots his horn. Do you understand? No? Oh. Tooting car man. Isn't it? Tooting car man. So he called him the Pharaoh, which is one of the all-time great nicknames. The Pharaoh. Mr. Ankers, the clipper rounding the Cape. Even today, when I'm driving around and I'm sort of doing the Volvo waltz across, middle, that white line's meant to go up the bonnet, right up the middle of the car, and people are beeping me up. "Hello, Pharaoh."
So if your dad grew up in the Depression, saw probably some amazing but terrible things in World War II, by the time you're in the scene, he's a man who's got his own business in Redcliffe, outside of Brisbane. He's near the water. It's a good pub down the road. There's peace and quiet. Lovely family. Do you think he felt like he'd built his own little bit of paradise?
Yes, he did. He loved it. I mean, that's what his view of getting lucky in many ways today would be so sillily modest. Why don't you wish for more? All he ever wanted was to have his family, a nice meal on the table, and everyone in the neighbourhood being looked after. It was a strange sort of, I don't know, pleasant, modest happiness he was after. You didn't have to be, a Rockefeller or a Packer or a Murdoch, just as long as you had enough not to worry about paying bills. And as he said, enough to give people if they came asking and they needed something. He was a very generous guy, and he would appropriate things like the movie matinee on a Sunday. My mum was telling us a story. He took her out to the movies to see, what was that Rooster Cogburn movie?
True Grit.
True Grit. And when John Wayne, at the end of the movie, says, "Fill your hands."
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch.
My dad stood up and went, "Go, you big bastard, go!" He was like he was at a football concert. "Oh, look at him go!" But suburban men, maybe not just suburban fathers, but they used to love the idea of the cowboys were a force of good, and no matter how rotten they were, they came good in the end. And he loved Rio Bravo. He loved Dean Martin in it. And there was a song in it called "My Wife, My Pony and Me." And there's a lyric in it that said, "It's time for a cowboy to dream." That was another thing he said to us sometimes. I remember my sister said after he died, "Do you remember he used to say, 'It's time for a cowboy to dream'?" I said, "Yeah." So sweet. And he took that from the film. And when he wasn't being the hale and hearty Errol Stewart's warehouse dad, he just come on and he just sort of stroked your head and he said, "It's time for a cowboy to dream." Old school, romantic usefulness.
You're listening to Conversations with Richard Fidler.
We're kicking off a month-long celebration of Conversations with one of your all-time favourite guests, actor and writer William McInnes. As is his wont, William's stories career wildly from the musical stylings of Perry Como to collecting a special sample from an emu. Can you confirm this for me?
Yes.
You have an iPod or an iPhone or something, and you have Perry Como on that. Can you confirm that that's true?
I have, yes, I have a number of Perry Como tracks. I have Seattle. What's the other one? Magic Moments. Everyone's got that one. And I Love You and Don't You Forget It, which is one of that's the best lyric. He says it. He repeats it. Fraser, "I love you and don't you forget it. I love you and don't you forget it. I love you and don't you forget it, baby. I love you and don't you forget it. I love you and don't you forget it. I love you and don't you forget it, baby. I love you and don't you forget it. That makes 8 times that I've said it." And they say they don't write songs like that.
They don't write songs like that
There's
anymore.
a reason.
Now, you're filming a documentary at the moment. What is that?
It's about bird watching.
Why have they chosen you?
Well, I have an interest in birds. My wife, Sarah Watt, she was a mad birder, and so was her mum, and I used to trail along with them. I tell you what I did do. I think I can safely say this. I'm the only dual Logie winner who's ever collected semen from an emu. And let me tell you, you haven't lived until you've done that, Richard Fidler.
You're going to have to tell me about that now, I'm afraid.
There's a terrific research scientist over in WA who's just doing all this really significant scientific research, and it's easy to take the mickey out of it. But what he's doing is fantastic, and he actually invited me to collect some semen from an emu, and I thought, well, okay.
Just like milking a cow.
Well, sort of. I mean, the cow's got a big beak, and it has a tendency to... and he told me, "You'll feel gentle peck." And that's what I did. And, yeah, and I turned and looked, and... And this little sort of thing like a parson's nose gone wrong popped out. But then it was one of those moments where you see this thing and you think, you know, there's not a lot that separates us.
I'm a man.
He's an emu.
He's an emu.
It's like, you know, the great designer had a sense of humour. It's a very weird thing, the scent of... They're big birds. Anyway, I digress. I always remember my mother going shopping. I used to love going shopping with my mum after school on a Friday. And then I saw a teacher at my school who was doing the shopping, and I thought, I'd never see a man doing shopping. What's he? And I didn't think like that teacher. And my mother just poked me and she said, "No, he's looking after 3 little girls because his wife died. You just watch yourself." And she said, "And it's always nice to see a man with a list doing the shopping because he actually does it properly, you know." And I just thought, oh, that's weird. But, you know, as you go on through life, I mean, you know, I ended up doing that after my wife died.
You were the widower in the supermarket.
Yeah. People sort of... It's you know, it still even happens today when people recognise you, and they sort of, the first thing that comes across their face is, oh, that's the guy whose wife died.
But it's weird when you're a single parent because you try and be a hybrid parent, which is not great. And you wonder how you get through something like that. And you can't forget something that's been a part of your life, nor should you, like that love and that affection that you had. It's not right to forget it, but you move on and you do your best.
It's been over a year since your wife Sarah passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote that in a holiday in Port Douglas, you were swimming out with your kids near the reef and that she felt very near. Does that feeling happen often to you?
Oh, gee, man, I don't know. It's a very hard thing when someone that you thought you were going to grow old with and be with leaves your life early. The pain you feel is as acute as ever. It just diminishes. It doesn't become all-consuming. But when you feel it, it's just awful because there's an awful finality to it. I still can't quite get my head around her not being there. And a part of it, no, she's not there. She's dead in one physical sense. But she's everywhere you are. I mean, she's in my kids and your thoughts. But it becomes less apparent, but even more acute. I mean, I don't think I'll ever not feel the pain when I have those shards of realisation that she's dead. And it's awful on so many levels too. So like sometimes I look at my kids and I just sort of want to, oh God, without them, because she was such a terrific force in their lives. She did a lot of work preparing us, I think, more than I was aware of. And when she died, and she died at home, and things happen, the undertakers come and the body lies there. And one of the worst moments I've ever had in my life was standing with her mother, and her mother was watching her body being taken away. And I just didn't know what to say to her. And I just sort of didn't know what to touch her. And I thought, no, she's just alone. And my son appeared, and he saw the body being taken away. And I turned to him and I said, "You all right, Clem?" And he went, "Yeah, it's all right. That's just a vessel that carried a beautiful soul." And I thought, man, wherever you pull that out of, you'll be good. You understand, you get it. And someone did a good job with him. And I think, it's something to remember. I mean, it's awful when someone dies. It's just, you're inconsolable, but you just have to sort of take it on the chin and get on with it, because if you don't, you just sort of, you stand still and you just submerge yourself and you don't enjoy life. And so many of the people who do die too early in people's lives, they give the gift of celebrating life. And it's not something that's going to give you a pat on the back or a statue, but it's the most generous thing I think people can do. You get your kids, and if someone says, "What do you want for them?" your immediate response is, "I just want them to be happy." And that doesn't work.
No.
I mean, because life will impact on them in all manner of ways.
Now, happiness is a byproduct of whatever you're supposed to be doing, isn't it?
And if happiness wouldn't be happiness if it wasn't that elated state, which is so lovely when you are happy, because you're not always happy. And when you think about your kids, like I found this thing yesterday, this buggy that my mum bought my daughter. It's a Y2K bug. It was just a cuddly toy, and it was this goofy-looking thing, which is really funny.
What, a stuffed toy?
Yeah.
It's called the Y2K
cross-eyed bug with all these arms and crazy antennas. And my daughter used to call it Buggy and used to sort of, play with it and put it in the sandpit and dress it up. And it's in my study at the back, and it's all sort of moth-eaten and a bit mottled. And I went, "Oh, it's Buggy." And I was thinking about it, and I'm thinking, that she was so cute when she buried one of my logies and watered it to make it grow in the sandpit when she was a toddler.
What?
Yeah.
Your daughter planted your logie?
They were just hanging around. It was on a bookshelf or something, and then she'd put it in the sandpit and sort of water it. And I thought, that's sort of cute. And you think that little kid, when my son was a toddler, he'd run around sort of catching butterflies and giggling when they'd, he could feel them in his hands, and then he'd just let them go up like that. And I thought, what a cute kid. And then my daughter turns out to be the young woman who holds my hand on a plane and soothes me and calms me. And then my son is this great big generous Clydesdale of a teenager who grows up into a sort of fully formed Carlton United draft horse. What stage do you want your kids to be? Emotionally, I don't know. I used to think 10 and under was the bomb for me. When I think of times in my life that I loved. It was having the kids, and not, it just changes. They're our own people after a while. And when they hug you, they give you everything they've got. It is such a precious feeling.
Now, we can't talk about fatherhood without talking about pyjamas. I think that's one of the key moments in a man's life when he becomes a father.
Yeah.
You realise you can't sleep in your jocks anymore, and you actually have to wear pyjamas if you're going to be an all-presentable father in your life. When you think of your own dad, what kind of pyjamas do you associate with him?
You could always tell the changing climes by my father's jammies. The warmer weather would bring shorty pyjamas, usually with knights or ships on them.
Like polycotton.
Yeah, polycotton.
Short sleeve, short pant.
And
a bit too loose around the gusset often too. That's always a bit of a... You've got to be careful when you sit down in those things, quite frankly, as a grown man.
Well, my father used to call it open sesame. And then in winter, he'd have the flannies, like the striped flannies, adorned with two-tone brown and then a mission brown cuff.
With a bit of piping around the wrist. So how about yourself, now that you've been wearing dad pyjamas for quite a while? How far outdoors will you go in those pyjamas?
Technically I've been outed on railway stations.
Oh, that's way further than I thought you'd go.
Delivering a lunch when my daughter was at school and I had to go give her the lunch.
What jammies are we talking about here? Are they sort of like...
They're not... Well, I had one with rocket ships on it, which was not a goer, but I had a pair of light blue pyjamas, which were great because I went to get a coffee after dropping kids off at the railway station, and I had Crocs on, and I just had a blue top and the long trousers, and the barista said, "Were you operating overnight?" And I went, "Huh?" Yes. I thought, what's he talking about? So here you go, doctor. He thought I was from surgery because it was a hospital up the road.
You would have looked like Hawkeye Pierce from MASH too, wouldn't you?
Oh, now you're talking. Hawkeye.
Always in his jammies and a dressing gown.
I do get caught sometimes doing the sort of rubbish night creep in my jammies. You know, like, the bottles are filled up, and so you have to go somewhere else, and I have to drop off my recreational Irish gargle water in various bins.
While you were studying drama in Perth, you took on a job as one of Santa's elves. Now, this seems unlikely to me because you're not petite, are you, William?
No, even when I was in fighting form, I was a large human being. But when I was at Whopper, I was very friendly with some ballet dancers. And Claudia was a beautiful ballet dancer, and she's a lovely woman. And she had a job Christmas night, Thursday night shopping, late night shopping in Perth, and she couldn't make it. And she said, "My friend William can be the stand-in elf." And I went there, and the woman who was the manager of the shopping centre was just like, she spoke like Sybil Fawlty, "Hello, how are you?" And she just burst out laughing. And then I went in to meet the other crew. She said, you can get into your costume there." And there was this sort of round woman who was a woman called Gretchen, she was Dutch. She was in an elf costume. And then there's this really thin little Santa who had an intense gaze. And he had a voice like that. He talked like that all the time. He said, where's Claudia? I said, "Claudia's doing a class. I'm a friend." She said, "I might be able to help." And he said, so how do you like Claudia? How do you like Claudia? I said, "She's a ballet dancer." "You're not a ballet dancer?" No, I'm a drama student." "Oh, you're a drama student? You're big for an actor. But he was an intense guy and quite eccentric. And he was the Santa. He thought I was a police officer because I was so big. So I said, "Listen, mate, I'm not a cop." He said, "Oh, only a copper would say that. Only a copper would say that. You're not a copper. You're not a copper?" And I said, "No, I'm not a copper. I'm a drama student." And so then he padded up and we went out into Thursday night shopping, and it was just scrunchies and high-waisted stonewashed jeans.
What were you wearing as an elf?
Well, the elf costume wouldn't fit me because I was too big. I had the elf ears and I had my elf cap, and I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and King G shorts and thongs.
Why was he worried that you might be a police officer as an elf?
Well, when he settled down, he said to me, "I can't be too careful, I can't be too careful." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I've done things. I'm an activist. Green things, political things. I don't want to say any more." So you had to sort of sit in the throne for 15 minutes, and then you'd preamble around the shopping centre. And Christmas tree came on. You know those awful tinny Christmas carols, Christmas tree, oh, Christmas tree, oh, Christmas tree. He sang "Keep the Red Flag Flying."
Oh, he was a communist.
I think he was. He knew that. And then, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." He sang, and people were applauding because I think Santa's singing. And he sang, "Have yourself a Marxist little Christmas, redistribute wealth and capital." He was a very strange man, but he's...
What an interesting spectacle it was to have Communist Santa with his 6'4" elf sidekick.
Podcast and broadcast. This is Conversations with Richard Fidler.
Before he became one of Australia's most accomplished actors, William did his theatrical time in a variety of supporting roles, including as a shopping centre Santa. How did you get a job as Santa?
Well, as all great adventures begin, it was over a liquid breakfast with my housemate, who was also an unemployed actor at the time, and he made a bet saying, whoever gets the job today gets a carton of grog. And I looked through the Daily Telegraph, and there was an ad there that said, urgently required, Santa Claus. And it was in Grace Brothers, Liverpool. And I went off to Grace Brothers, caught the train from Bronte to Liverpool, and I had this meeting with somebody, and she spoke like this. What makes you think you have the ability to be one of the better department stores of Australia's Santa? And I thought, I'll just muck around. She's talking like I don't speak English, and I just went, me be good Santy, me believe I'm Santa Claus. She looked at me, picked up a phone and said, he was the only one? Hung up, and she went, congratulations, you've got the job. You are the new Santa Claus. And I was terrible, all right? I freely admit I was a terrible Santa. I just started going out with Sarah Watt. I just met her. This is the woman who was going to become my wife. I took her out to lunch, which was a miracle. It was at Chinatown. It was a $5 soup in Chinatown. And I said, I have to ask you a question. And she was thinking, well, this is pretty full on, and we've only just started going out. I said, can you give me $20 so I can buy some gumboots so I can get this job as Santa? And she just laughed and said, sure, this relationship is going to be fantastic. And she visited me, and she sort of saw me on the throne. She loved misadventure, Sarah. She just loved when things went pear-shaped and just riding it. But she was also very shy and reserved, and she just gave this little wave, and I saw her, and I went, you beauty, I'll have a bit of fun here, and I just jumped up from my throne, and for some reason they always made the Santa's throne near intimate apparel for women. I think the idea was that, kids would be taken care of, and they'd buy some of Burley's best. I jumped up, ran after Sarah, collected a few bras on my way, and was screaming like a loon, Merry Christmas, I will go on a cuddle, give me a cuddle. And they must have had a problem with their Santas, this short, because one of the security officers asked Sarah, is that Santa bothering you? And she said, yes. And I got tackled like Trevor Gilmeister tackling someone in a State of Origin match. And I was led off to a room, and I was sat down, and I was told, keep your hands where we can see them and don't take off your beard. I was sitting there going, oh, Christ, what's going to happen here? And some came in, and all the managers talked slowly. What is going on? And I said, she's my girlfriend, and I was just having a bit of fun, I'm sorry. She is your girlfriend? And I nodded, and then Sarah said, yes, I'm his girlfriend. She just burst out laughing. West Footscray was a pretty funny little suburb because it allowed people an elasticity and an acceptance of eccentricity and just being, and it was, you're all right, you belong here. I was walking past this guy, and he had a bottle, and he was looking at me, and I thought, oh, that's a bit weird. And this bloke, he said, here, look, and he had a soft drink bottle, this empty soft drink bottle, and he said, look through it. And I picked it up, and he said, look at the sun. And I looked at the sun, and it was like a kaleidoscope. You turned it round, and it was quite frankly beautiful, and it was magical. And I just laughed a little. And this guy said, be happy, Merry Christmas, yours.
How lovely.
I tried to give him some money, and he said, no, laughter's enough. And I thought, that's a gift, man. That's a gift. And when I moved out of that house, and it's a tough thing, man, moving out of the home where your children are born and where Sarah died there. And it was just a hideous, awful wrench to move. And after a while, you had to skip and you just go mental and you throw all this stuff in there. And
I was going through my study and I found the bottle, I kept it, and I thought to myself, of all the Christmas presents, of all the sort of random kindness, that's one of the most beautiful things. And I just thought, there's no such thing as random kindness. There's just good citizenship, good humanity. That's a myth, random kindness. And what that guy exhibited was something so precious and shone with such luster. It just put such a big jump in my step. And I never saw him again. And I'll never forget him, though. And I'm actually looking at it now, that old soft drink bottle.
You still have it?
Oh, I could not give it away. I couldn't just put it away, which is a bit weird, I know, but it's just sort of this bits of flotsam and jetsam. It was given to me by another human that, well, I don't want to get all sort of too sooky over it, but it was just a little touch of magic.
I'd really love you to tell me the story about how your family managed to get hold of a rabbit very briefly. How did it appear on your front doorstep?
I don't know. It was on the nature strip, and it was this great big white rabbit. It was a big rabbit. It was as big as big as a big cat. You know, it was not a lion, but it was a big furry animal. It had these great big droopy ears. And we were just doing something out the front, I think dropping someone off, and my daughter went, "Daddy, there's a bunny, can we keep it?" And I said, "There's no rabbit out here." And there was this thing. It was a massive rabbit.
What, on the nature strip?
Yeah.
Like a magic creature or something?
It was that big.
Right.
And I said, well, we'll take it in and we'll put a couple of, messages on the telegraph poles around the electricity poles around the suburb.
Lovely, fluffy rabbit.
This thing was a psychopath. It was a French lop. It was like a Hannibal Lecter unleashed from the hockey mask. It was like Magneto on a bad day.
Why? Why? What did it do?
Well, it was just malevolent. It was like it scratched the bejesus out of you, you know.
Did you have a name for it?
We call it Mr. Snowy, I think we called it, which sounds like a serial killer. And anyway, I thought we're going to keep it, great, and it would burrow out. And we put it in a hutch. It had just pushed the hutch along trying to get out. It was like something out of some laboratory. Like I think it came from the CSIRO place. I sort of took it up to the local vet. He's a great guy. He's sort of, "Oh, how you doing, mate? You okay?" like that. And I said, "Paddy, what can you do for me?" He said, "What is it?" "Oh, it's a rabbit." And I said, "What are they?" It's a French lop, Bill." I said, "What can you do, Paddy?" "They're buggers of things, Bill." I said, "What can you do?" "I can cut its nuts off for you." I went, "Okay, you do that." And if anything, he just went completely troppo after that. Every time he saw me, he just sort of tried to lunge at me. And then one day...
Do you think... Are you saying this rabbit blamed you?
I reckon he did. He had those pink red eyes. You know how you think you got red eye camera? It was like a laser. It was like a mutant rabbit.
It blamed you for its neutering.
Yes,
it blamed you.
Yeah, and then the kids went off, and even Stella went off, and she said, "Mr. Snowy's awful." Mr. Snowy. Well, I put it on a lead once, and it was like as a to see what would happen, because I saw in a magazine, a pets magazine, that they had some pop star had a thing on a rabbit, a weasel on a rabbit, not a
weasel on a rabbit.
What do you call that?
A leash.
That's the video I was watching the other night. No, a leash. Yeah, there's no thing, the ferret on a leash. So I put this thing on there, and it was bouncing around, running at me. It was awful. But then one afternoon there was a, "Hello, have you seen this rabbit?" I said, Yes, it's in the back. It's in my backyard." And it was like, she was so astounded that it was like, this is the crazy guy who pretends to have my pet rabbit at the back so he can attack me and lock me up in the cellar. I said, I'll go get it. And I actually took about 15 minutes trying to catch the bloody thing and yelling out to her, "Just wait there, I've got it." And I brought this thing, I gave it to her, and she goes, "Snowflake." And I went, "Whoa, no wonder he's so angry, big snowflake." And then she said, "He's a breeding rabbit." I went, "Not anymore." And then Clem's saying, "Didn't we cut?" "No, we didn't, mate. It's all right. Don't worry about that." And so she sits in a car, and it was a Peugeot. I was thinking, only a Peugeot driver would have a French breeding rabbit, a French lop thing. And she held up this rabbit, and she waved its paw at me. It sort of stared at me. And I tell you, if it had a gun or a knife in its hands, it would have attacked me. It sort of like that. It sort of bared its big teeth. I don't know what happened to him, but it was like, I've still got scratches on my wrist somewhere.
William McInnes, always a pleasure, sir.
Well, it wasn't a very lineal one, was it? Perry Como's
me. As opposed to the other 3 interviews we've done. Yeah.
Well, you started it.
Podcast, broadcast. This is Conversations with Richard Fiedler. Hear more conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app. Or go to abc.net.au/conversations.
You've been listening to Maximum McInnes, stories from actor and writer and much-loved Conversations guest, William McInnes. Sarah and I are in Adelaide for the start of the Conversations live tour. And while we're on the road, we've handpicked 20 stories for 20 years. And starting this weekend, you'll also find specially compiled story collections in your feed, themed collections of unforgettable stories from people who've seen and done amazing things. Conversations is created and lands at the Gadigal, Jagera and Turrbal peoples. Producer and story editor was Michelle Ransom-Hughes. Executive producer is Carmel Rooney. I'm Richard Fiedler. Thanks for listening.